oh my god, it's overpowered, it's crazy, it's going to totally disrupt the flow of the game. This is the death of capital ships. Their Grim Reaper hath arrived in the form of the Crusader Industries Ares. OMG, power creep personified, the end of the world, blah 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 blah. Right? So that's basically been the last 24 hours. What is the Crusader Industries Ares? What does it mean for the game? And is it a good ship? We're going to endeavor to answer some of these questions using the tried and true formula of minion soldier logic. We're going to look at it objectively. We're going to judge it not based on its artistic, skill, on its art, how well it was realized and what kind of fine finishings does it have in the interior. Does it come with a cup holder? All these things that really mean jack shit to ships, but apparently is so important to some people. Is it a good ship? On its own? Solo? No. As a part of a wolf pack? These things would be devastating. Absolutely devastating. That is my opinion. Now, you might say, well, how do you know? How do you know it's not going to be that good of a ship on its own? Well, the preliminary calculations, and you can go and you can see them on Spectrum. People are kind of putting this thing in the 1700-ish, zone for DPS. And, once again, this is a ship that doesn't exist in game, and technically the weapons like it exist in the game. Its weapons and how those weapons work through it have not been fully realized. So those numbers are somewhat, to be taken with a grain of salt. But as people have said, the Buccaneer does more damage with its guns all put together than this thing does. By a hair. But it does. So the idea that this thing is going to absolutely devastate and rip up the universe, maybe, maybe not. Now, to ships like the Cutlass, could be something of a concern. But, maybe, maybe not. Once again, there are so many different facets of this ship that have yet to be realized. And in fact, for all ships, there's a dimension that we have not really visited yet, which is what equipment can we really put on the ship? What is the final form of that equipment going to be, and how is that going to affect the performance of the ship? Is it going to, is it going to be more maneuverable than a Vanguard? Is it going to be less maneuverable than a Vanguard? Probably more, but we don't know yet. So what I would say is this. If you and your org mates or your friends are thinking about getting together, and some with the Gatling gun was kind of like my favorite of the two, and some with the laser weapon, and mixing it up and forming a wolf pack for going out and hunting together, specifically if you're going after larger, less maneuverable targets, I don't think that it's a bad idea. I really don't. But if you're buying one of these solo and you're planning to fly it around solo, and you think you're going to become like the uber god of the universe, maybe not. It's a lot is gambled on that one gun. For the capital ship pilots out there, who some of which are panicking and are like, "Oh my God, it destroys the balance of the game." Rah. Does it? Because the Retaliator already existed. The Harbinger already existed. There are plenty of ships out there that represent somewhat of a threat to you. One of these ships, on its own, is not going to represent all that much of a threat to you. But a large group of them could represent a significant threat to you. The idea that you can just simply buy an Idris or whatever and just fly it around solo in the universe has never really been a thing that anyone believed, especially if you were taking it into combat, was going to be a good idea. I think I remember there was some asshole on YouTube who told people that multiple times over the years. Maybe not the best idea. Now, it is entirely possible that with NPC, crewed turrets, you could give one or two of these things quite a hard time indeed. It is entirely possible. But as the numbers stack against you, your chances of survival drop drastically. Now, it looks really good, but you know what? There was another ship that looked really good in concept until they changed it. So these things, once again, are up in the air. We don't know where this ball is going to land. There's so many things in this game that are not fully realized yet, so it's very difficult to say good or bad. But I would basically say this, and this is probably, you know, the third or fourth attempt I've made to record this video. I would say this: if you are planning to go out with a large group of people who also are equipped with this ship, and you want to form like a hunting party, a wolf pack, if you will, and search out those larger targets and swarm them, I think you're going to be somewhat successful. Maybe not as successful as the advertising material is telling you it's going to be. I think you're probably going to need more than 5, but I don't think that it is entirely going to be an unhappy way of life. But at the same time, you could achieve the same thing with harbingers, retaliators. You know, there are a multitude of ships that can represent a threat to capital ships. It's not just this ship. And when you're dealing with capital ships, this is kind of re-emphasizing the fact that you want to go out there with a group of friends. You know, when you hear me talking about ships like owning a Cutlass or owning, you know, some of the smaller ships like the Cutlass, why I'm so, you know, so happy with those ships and so excited with those ships, and why would I still own those ships if I own something much larger? It's because I realize that the much larger thing is not an everyday driver. What's probably going to be the everyday driver is probably going to be something a lot more reasonable, like a Corsair or a Cutlass. That's what I'm going to aim for most of the time. When I'm fully supported, when I have a large group with me, that's when maybe something bigger comes out. But once again, depending on the situation. I think that maybe there are some people who kind of aren't fully accepting that reality, and obviously have been like that for quite some time, because we've had these debates many times over the years. Do I think that it's going to end the world for capital ships? No, not really. But for people who are lazy or who don't really pay attention, people who think it's just going to be 100% PvE citizen all the time, probably not. But if you're in a capital ship and you're in secure space, then you can probably count on the help of authorities to, you know, come in and help you. And it's probably like a situation like this, it may look like, oh, this is intimidating. I don't think that Idris is going to fall apart in like 1 or 2 minutes. I think it's going to last a little bit longer than that, so there's probably plenty of time to get help where help is needed. And in the larger, more secure systems, that help is probably not all that far away, even if it's in the form of NPCs to protect you. Now, does this mean that you're in the clear in a capital ship? No, it doesn't. I mean, you have to look at it like this situation that they're displaying here. You know, they're closing in on the Idris. What if that Idris has, I don't know, like 3 arrows or 3 gladiuses in its hangar? Whether they're piloted by players or whether they're piloted by NPCs at the expert level, or however that system is going to come to fruition, it's probably going to change the equation somewhat as well. Missiles coming out of the Idris could also change that equation a lot. The idea that this represents something to be panicked about or to be afraid of, not really. It's just another, it's a little bit less of a retaliator. It's a little bit more than a harbinger, maybe, in terms of threat to a large capital ship. As a single ship, I don't think it's all that devastating or all that frightening. In fact, you know, I don't really kind of feel myself being all that kind of worried about it. Even as a Cutlass owner, not all that much. Because another thing you have to think about with a ship like this is, sure, there's going to be plenty of ones and twosies that are sold out there, and there's going to be people who are going to buy the double package, but realistically, the most dangerous and devastating people in this fight are going to be the people who buy it as part of a group. You know, a whole bunch of members of an org are all getting this ship, and they're all going to go out in wolf packs, and they're going to be highly coordinated, and they're going to be very, very selective about their targets, and they're going to go out and they are going to, chances are, win more often than not. But that's not only true of this ship, that is true of many other ships in the Star Citizen universe. If you were to put the same people in variants of the Vanguard, the Sentinel, the Harbinger, and the Vanguard Warden, they would probably be equally as successful. If they were to go out in Retaliators and Gladiators and Harbingers, they would probably be equally as successful against larger, slower moving targets. It doesn't really change the balance in any significant way. It's a gimmick ship. It's built for doing a very specific thing. It's clearly not built for living on. It's clearly not built for dogfighting an arrow. And I mean, once again, truth be told, if this Idris were to spit out 3 fighters right now, or even just 2 Gladiuses, this engagement that they're showing you in this image totally flips on its head, and these guys are going in the other direction because they can't afford to get those light fighters on their ass. You know what I'm saying? And deal with the Idris at the same time. And the Idris, once again, is not going to be an opponent that folds. The Kraken is not going to be an opponent that folds to a threat like this immediately. And the turrets on the Kraken look pretty friggin' devastating to something like this. So you have to kind of look at the marketing material that CIG puts out with these ships and the way that they sell them, hardcore, dangerous, blah. Is it really? I mean, it depends on who's flying it, how they're flying it, and how organized they are, how smart they're being with it. I don't think that this is something that literally any player with no skill can just hop in, get in this ship, and just start blowing Idrises out of the sky and just start blowing Cutlasses out of the sky. I mean, there are going to be pilots out there. I mean, there are some very super hardcore people in things like the Gladius who will eat this thing for breakfast, and it won't even, they won't even break a sweat doing it. It will be completely not challenging. So when you see a ship like this and you see people going like, oh yeah, this is going to be great, we're going to get a wolf pack together, maybe not, right? It depends on what you run into. You can't just go out there and say, we're going to fight everything. No, you have to fight very specific things, and you have to kind of control the engagement and know what the variables are as you go into it. And you're probably going to find more often than not that you have to walk away from engagements or avoid them altogether because it's not your ideal scenario. Remember, this is a very specific ship for a very specific purpose. So the idea that this is something that really changes the meta or just changes the balance in the Star Citizen universe, as some very vocal but probably not all that many people are saying, I really think that it really doesn't it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. That is outright devastating. Sure, that gun looks a little intimidating, but is it going to really live up to that threat in the Star Citizen universe? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on so many things that are not realized in the game yet. We don't really know how this ball is going to bounce. So I would say this: if you're going to purchase this as a part of a group, a large group of people, and you're going to go out with these things and you're going to hunt the lazy, the incompetent, who just don't care, who think that this is supposed to be PvE Citizen, you're probably going to be very successful. But if you're taking this into highly organized and highly coordinated groups who are kind of like you are, very much serious about succeeding in the game and not being anyone's bitch, you might find that you're going to have a lot tougher time, because chances are they're also going to come with that light fighter support in the form of carriers or in the form of Idrises or whatever can carry them, and they're probably going to give you quite a challenge. So it's an interesting ship, but does it really bring anything new to the table? Not really. Does it change the balance of the game? No. It's just the new gimmick. It's the new thing. And how many of these ships are going to survive the next concept sale? Right? Because how many ships have you bought and said, oh my god, this is going to be the thing, and then a year later you're like, I can't believe I melted it for this thing. This thing is so much better. You know, it's the thing with all these newer ships. Sometimes they look really good in the beginning, but then you realize, oh, I'm probably going to be waiting 3 years for this thing to come out, so maybe not. So is it the end of the world? No, I don't think that it is. In the hands of people who use it wisely, I think it's going to be very successful. But once again, that's true of just about every single ship in the Star Citizen universe, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, because they're totally crap. Anyways, that's the show for today. That's my opinion on the world-ending Crusader Ares. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.